Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. What a wonderful thing. The International Women in Travel and Tourism Forum. What I love, we all needed this opportunity for a great series of events that will really inspire radical thinking. I'm excited today as a sustainability expert to have a panel who's coming together to think about diversity, talk about diversity. My background, I've been a journalist for 2.5 decades. I exist really to try and inspire all to seek out better choices for positive impact. But as a consultant, I also work with businesses to help them stand out for something and stand for something. But what I'm most keen to do always is encourage all to have deeper conversations around sustainability. And of course, that's not just about the environment or about treading more lightly on this planet. It's actually about improving the quality of life for its people. And a huge part of that is through storytelling. I am thrilled we're having this chat because, as we know, many businesses and destinations could definitely be better engaging with more diverse audiences. There's been a lot of discussion in recent years around this and inclusion, but I still think, are we considering every aspect from age to accessibility as well? So look, we have a great panel to share insights and experiences. I'll let them introduce themselves. Let's start with Albert. Will you introduce yourself?
Albert Kimbo is my name. I am a senior lecturer in hospitality and tourism at the University of Surrey, and I do research on gender, entrepreneurship, and social policy in tourism. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be part of the panel.
Cecilia.
Oh, should I go next? Can everybody hear me? Hi, good afternoon, and Eid Mubarak to everyone celebrating. I am Cecilia Ajay, former brand partnerships manager for Visit Britain and Visit England, and a freelance consultant across brand and cultural marketing strategy. So really excited to be here with you all.
Thank you, Jamie Lee.
Hi everyone, I'm Jamie Lee Abtar and I'm a tourism marketing consultant, and I'm also the program lead for the BAME program at Women and Travel CIC. So looking forward to being here today.
And Noah.
Hi everyone, I'm Nawar. I'm the Senior Industry Manager in travel at Google. I've been at Google for close to a decade now, and in the last 5 years focused on the travel industry. I also am working internally in what we call the people pillar, where we focus on bringing together a diverse and inclusive team. So I've got a really strong interest in this area. Eid Mubarak to everyone celebrating, and really excited about joining this panel.
Thank you so much. So as we know, I mean, the holy grail for all of us is having travel businesses that are flinging open their doors even wider to all travelers, regardless of age, race, gender, sexuality, ideology, and all of us sharing more stories that are going to help better accessibility for more people. So it's a big, is it a big ask? But, you know, in pursuit of this holy grail, what are the biggest issues that we should be addressing? I'm going to start with you, Cecilia. Ooh, are we having a sound? Did everyone hear me okay? So Cecilia, I would love you to answer that. I know you're going to have lots. Oh, we've got a challenge. Well, you know.
Sorry to interrupt if anyone is speaking. I can't hear anything.
Oh, so. Okay. I need. It's 2021. We're meant to be walking on the moon by now, all of us. And yet working. Are you with us? Okay, you're on mute. I'd love you to, Cecilia, I'd love you to ponder what the barriers are to finding this holy grail of better accessibility to all.
I think we've lost Cecilia, but I can jump in there for you.
Yes, please. Thanks.
I think trying to achieve this holy grail, I think it's really critical for us to keep in mind that this is a long game. And it's not necessarily something that will happen immediately, because I think in the last year, you know, there has been an awakening to certain inequalities for some people, and you know, you just can't put up a black square on Instagram for a day and expect sales to increase because of your newfound values. You need to kind of back that up with actionable steps. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that I'm seeing in terms of the performative allyship and not backing up what you're putting out there in action behind the scenes. She's back.
We don't just want performative sort of behavior. So Cecilia, Holy Grail, navigate us to it, please.
I think there's two answers here for you. On one hand, we really need to make sure that there is representation across the board. We can't just keep hiring execs of color and expecting them to be all your prayers. I mean, we need to be in the rooms where decisions are being made and at the tables where they're being made and the decisions are being had. And that's from the top. That's not, a bottom-up approach. It really starts from the top. If you look around the industry today, on the 13th of May, 2021, you can, you'd be hard pressed to look at, the teams. I guess you'd be you'd struggle, especially in the UK, across the board in the travel, hospitality industries. And then the second answer, I'd say definitely make sure that the teams that you're working with have to be diverse. You can't expect to know it all. And I think that the White Awakening has shown that, which, I feel like that was what we experienced last year. A lot of people coming to terms with who they are, their privilege, the fact that other people have to deal with certain issues that are imposed on them for various different reasons. It's really important that if you're going to now attract an audience, speak to an audience, be seen to care, to want sustainable change, you really need to make sure that you're working with the people that actually have the answers, that have lived experiences, and that also can give you that insight. You can't make that.
You told me about a case, where the tourist boards or it could be any business or organization where they're targeting a certain group, but they're not involving members of the community that they're trying to speak to, which seems like textbook,
Yeah. A few years ago, it was crazy because, one of those moments where you're like, is this real? Or is this the Truman Show? We were doing a campaign for the Gulf region, so really celebrating Muslim travelers in the UK, and there was no one from the Muslim community in this room or on this campaign, and you're sitting there like, okay, let's all Google this then, thanks Noir and gang, but it doesn't work all the time, and it's important, and it's also almost disrespectful to dismiss the importance of having that representation when you're planning something for the people you're planning it for. Like, I also did a heavy metal campaign, completely irrelevant, kind of irrelevant, everyone. Heavy metal, not my thing. And I had to draw in my friends, colleagues from the team who are metal heads, because otherwise the campaign would have fallen flat, with a lot of money wasted, probably would have got sacked. Terrible decision.
This seems logical, so that's good advice. I mean, obviously, it's just really logical, whether you're promoting a club night to the right audience, whatever it is, get people involved. Absolutely. Exactly. Albert, what do you, yes. I know.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to chip in there to add on to Cecilia's observations, I think it is important that we get the right people. We don't just engage in getting people for the sake of getting people to represent that particular community or that particular group of persons, but ensuring that those we get on board actually have something to contribute to any initiative that is being put in place. So that's really, really critical, because there have been instances where just to organizations saying, oh, we are representative, we have Black people, we have white people, we have LGBTQ people, we have people from diverse communities. But no, what are they contributing to advancing that agenda? That's the question. So a word of caution, for businesses to actually reflect on what any addition they are bringing into the team is actually going to contribute.
Advancing, I think, was the key word there, really advancing it. Jamie Lee or Noah, have you got a contribution? Yes, Noah.
Sure. And I just wanted to say I agree with what everyone has said on this topic, but I think it's important to remember that there's a whole spectrum of issues that needs to be addressed, right? From to Cecilia's point, hiring and retention at the management level in these travel companies, all the way through representation in travel marketing and advertising. And at Google, we use data to inform everything that we do, right? From the products that we develop all the way through how we design our people processes and outcomes. But the reality is with diversity issues, we often face this issue of we don't have the data, right? And so I think there's now becoming, there's a better awareness that companies are making more of an effort to kind of understand the makeup of their workforce, to understand what needs to happen in order to kind of build more diverse and inclusive teams. But really one of the key like underlying things that needs to happen is education at every level. And that's from the CEO all the way down to the person who's managing guest relations, right? So it's a tough one because it's a long process. And to Jamie Lee's first point, it's not going to change overnight. And which is why sometimes the piece around the performative activism is a little bit kind of misleading, because we know that companies don't just become a different company overnight. It's a long process, and it's important to understand that.
Lee, I'm sure you have something to add.
Well, we view it as, I think a lot of times diversity and inclusivity is in the travel industry is viewed as only a strategic marketing imperative instead of focusing on actually creating diverse marketing teams. So it really goes back to Cecilia's original point, because I think that is central and core to getting it right when we talk about diversifying travel marketing. From top to bottom, the environments must also be very reflective of the brand messaging that we are trying to portray.
We're talking about as well is, and I've seen in the comments, it can't be tokenism, but it's about striving for proper cultural change, systemic change. And it's not just about how we present and language things. Something I've certainly noticed in the last year, and we can coin this term together, is a lot of diversity washing since last summer's Black Lives Matter events. I feel that there's so many stock images being put into all forms of marketing so as to look more representative of a wider range of people. I don't know what your observations or thoughts are on this. So should I go back to you, Cecilia? Do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I think, and I love the term that we've coined, because it's very true, and the doors are flinging open at the moment. You're seeing a lot of campaigns emerging with, a person of color that you wouldn't have seen a year ago. Let's be completely honest. At Visit Britain, Visit England, we only started using people of color very recently in a lot of our advertisements. And I think it's really interesting because you're kind of like, well, how long is this going to last? Noah made a really good point that I just want to kind of bring in to explain what I'm trying to say about the performativeness of it. At the moment, yes, they want to be seen to be doing the right thing and to be seen to going in the right direction. So if a response for them is to put someone of color in an advertisement, they probably think that they're doing the right thing for now. My kind of challenge to that is, for how long? Because if you're just going to put somebody in an advert to tick a box, how long does that box stay open for ticking? And what does that mean to your campaign? Because actually it's not part of your strategy to cater to these different communities. It's just, let's pop someone in there because everyone's screaming at the moment. And I'm hopeful that, we will get to a point where we won't even need to see it as, we need to make sure that we've got somebody in a wheelchair in this ad so that it looks like it's accessibility, or encouraging and celebrating accessibility, or having a Black person in the middle of Cornwall so it looks like it's inclusive. There's bigger issues at hand. And once we start focusing on that and how we can actually make the tourism industry inclusive for all of those people and not just, a certain group, then we'll start to move in the right direction, I think. And it will be less of this like washing and more of this is normal.
That's such a great point. I will just say, obviously we have to start in terms of it has to be more than just the visibility. But I do think, you've mentioned representing people with disabilities. I do think people often sort of forget that 20% of people everywhere have a serious physical or mental impairment, and they don't feel represented at all or spoken to through much marketing, not just in the travel industry. So I think a starting point with that certainly is to obviously follow through and provide a great experience, but also that visibility. And I also think, the diversity washing, we use that term, is to realize that we really have to think of everyone feeling represented. It's just, images are just so narrow in terms of what they're representing in the travel sector. Has anyone else? Yes, Albert, please.
Yeah. Just to follow on Cecilia's observations again once more, I think where do we begin? Are we going to start with management realizing that there is need for change, actual change, or are we going to start at the bottom within our societies, within our communities? Because once that awareness is not there within the society in which we live, it manifests itself in how we think and how we run our businesses. So I think education and that awareness of the need for change, for inclusion, for acceptance of the other is really, really crucial in shaping the way organizations, or tourism organizations, would manifest, would act when it comes to dealing with issues of diversity. So it starts at the bottom. It starts in the schools. It starts in the students we train to become the professionals tomorrow. It starts in our families. That acceptance of people with disabilities, of people who are LGBTQ, of people who are Black or brown or biracial, or you name the rest. We need that total paradigm shift in how we think. And that is, if we do that, it's going to be reflected in how businesses are run and operate. It's going to create innovation, because it's clear and it's obvious that the more diverse structures we have within organizations, the more innovative they are. So it's really, really important to think about that.
I think we all completely agree with you. It's not about paying lip service. It's not just about acting differently. It's about everyone thinking differently. How can you add to that, Albert? How do we encourage that? I mean, this forum and all these events, that's a great way to help. How can we all try and shift?
How do we encourage that? I think the starting point would be being true to ourselves. What we know and what we don't know. It's not pretending and shielding and hiding glass veils or concrete bunkers and pretending to be what we are not. If we are true to ourselves and we are open and honest to learn about others, then that is going to be a good starting point. If we don't realize and recognize that we have deficiencies as humans, nobody is perfect, nobody knows it all, then we can't start. We can't start having those conversations.
And be more human, and being more human and connected. Nawar, you've obviously flagged authenticity, which is absolutely what we need.
Absolutely. I think to Albert's point, authenticity is so crucial here. And I think what we have to remember is that consumers are smart enough to pick up when a brand is just paying lip service, right? And we saw that with we all knew all these brands were essentially just performing activism in the way that they were. Having said that, I think it's important to acknowledge as well that there's a lot of good intention right now. And I do believe that travel companies can and should have a voice in speaking about diversity and inclusion. But it's crucial for them to include their consumers in developing that transparent point of view on the key social issues that they want to focus on. I mean, we heard the example from Rachel at Expedia, where they've now turned Orbitz into an LGBTQIA plus travel company. And the reason the reason they were able to do that is because they listened to the consumers. They really tried to understand who the consumers are and what they can do for this community. So I think having that honest discussion and honest reflection within the company is important. Listening to your consumers is important, and it's important to be real. Like, you just cannot do this as just something that you're going to do over a weekend or a few days and then forget about it, because people will remember that.
Jamie Lee, what are your thoughts?
Coming back to your point when you asked Albert about how can we really encourage that, and I really wanted to pinpoint a case study, because what we are doing right now with the university is story in terms of allyship and going in and training and working with their senior leaders, and then hopefully at some point in time having it embedded into the curriculum to actually teach the future of the travel and tourism industry, giving them the practical steps. And we have to remember that we all come from different backgrounds and different everything. everything. Culture is everything. And, you know, understanding that, you know, you might have a particular privilege over someone else, and how can you use that to help someone to advance? It's as simple as that in the workplace. Do you understand? So I'm really passionate about that program that we have with the University of Surrey and other universities to try to encourage within an educational sector, particularly the ones that are coming in the future of the travel and tourism industry, around allyship and how they can be better allies to individuals. Because then it comes back to that point of when we have our marketing teams and we are sat and we are around the table and we are developing campaigns and we are brainstorming. How do you be respectful of each other? How do you, how do you share your perspectives with someone and debate these things? So yeah, everybody made some brilliant points just now.
I mean, it's important to, as I keep saying, it's having these conversations, because we'll all have different perspectives on, and ideas. It's more original thinking, and education is everything. As we know, education is really everything. So something that I've thought about a lot, actually, and I will ask Noah this particular question, which is, I think we've observed that marketing has become really very targeted for some time. And this sort of segmentation for me kind of runs counter to what we're aiming for in terms of being more inclusive and diverse, because you're very specifically trying to have one particular audience. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's important to understand that it's not mutually exclusive to have a campaign that is well targeted and efficacious, but also having content that's creative and inclusive, right? Because I think, people are a little bit worried about moving away from the cookie cutter types of content that they're used to, that has worked in the past, to, going into more creative, more diverse type of content, which I think would make the company stand out. Because how many times have you seen a beach holiday advertisement that has, the same type of families, the same type of beaches, the same type of holidays? It's quite, it's cookie cutter. You can't even tell the difference sometimes between one company and another. And I think it's important then for us to understand that, if you are inclusive, not only will you capture the interest of more people, because more people can see themselves in the advertising, you'll also likely stand out from the crowd. And I think that's a really important point, because having inclusive content does not make you any worse. It in fact could make you a lot better off. And we see this in a lot of experimentation on advertising we see today. And I think it's also important to understand that, use data to inform, right? Sometimes the reason that it doesn't work is nothing to do with the fact that it is, an inclusive character that you're introducing into the advertising. It could be a lot of other factors. So it's really important to kind of really know, what's actually working and what's not, and to use data to kind of inform that.
Thank you so much. I wanted to follow on with that and sort of ask Albert, actually, and please then anyone else who wants to chip in. But what are your observations when it comes to common mistakes maybe being made in travel marketing, which are acting as a barrier to creating and cultivating this diversity and inclusion?
Thank you very much. Very relevant question for our times, and when you think about travel marketing, I think this follows on from Noah's observation about that idea of creating and designing products which reflect the society in which we live. Most often than not, if you think about the UK's population, which is 13% foreign or from people from different backgrounds, non-white backgrounds, and you look at the images which are shown by the tour operators, there is a complete lack. And one of the key mistakes, basically, is that overwhelmingly whitewashed representation of travel by travel marketers of destinations, of products which they have on offer, and it just doesn't work. I, as a Black person, as a person of color, I don't feel part of it. I don't engage in it. Second, there is that misunderstanding or lack of knowledge of the demands or the needs of the younger generation of travelers, especially those who are others. I'll take the Black community, for example. It is young, it is vibrant, it is socially connected. They are they're moving away from their parents' and grandparents' generations, which were struggling to survive, to the middle class and upper middle class. Where do they travel to? Where do they go? How do they enjoy their vacations? No, there's very little research which has looked at that. And because there's no knowledge about it, then the products which are on offer don't reflect this group and they feel excluded. Third, there is a lack of role models and leaders that represent and reflect the diversity of the community, of the customers who are, the community who are the consumers of the products being offered. Okay, and this needs to be changed. This needs to be taken on board by operators, by businesses operating in the sector. And finally, there is quite a lot of commoditization, which still takes place. You know, the way the packaging is done, destinations are still being bought and are presented as goods to be bought and sold. And what happens is you have these packages which are designed to limit interaction at the destination environments. And this is really critical. So you buy a package, you go on a holiday, and you don't interact with where you're going to. You're basically blocked in. You know, you are rammed in within a particular enclave, within a particular resort, and you have no connection. Whereas when we're talking about responsible tourism, we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about the need for community engagement, that is not the type of tourism, but that is what is being sold.
Of course, I mean, this is a big, absolutely, we need to change the narrative, but we also, we need to engage better when we travel. I'd love it if anyone had some, and I know there are questions popping up. I was just going to come to those towards the end, but I just wondered if there were any examples of successful initiatives that we think have improved diversity in a practical sense. I mean, obviously, those attending, some are employers or others are students, but, you know, what are some really great examples of how diversity has been improved through initiatives in a way that's also enriched guest experience, that's also improved revenue perhaps for the businesses? I don't know if Jamie Lee or if Cecilia wanted to answer that.
I think I'm going to go with, in terms of businesses that I think are doing well in the travel industry, I think we are still a long way off when it comes to DEI in the travel industry, first of all. But there are some organizations who have been making great progress. I'd say I'd lean towards Expedia. We just had them on the previous panel, and I say Expedia because they're doing the work internally, and that's where it really begins and really starts. By, you know, their trainer programs, their allyship workshops, which everyone is supposed, everyone in the organization has, and that then trickles down. They do it amongst almost 4,500 employees. So I think that's really important, to being able to creating that internal culture for diversity and inclusivity first, and then you will naturally see it flow in the marketing, the advertising, the experiences that guests have in a destination, in a particular hotel, because they're setting their kind of values for what Expedia stands by. So another one that comes to mind, that says Intrepid Travel, who are one of the sponsors for today's session. They are, once again, it comes back to that internal process. The ones that I see it doing, and it's we have the case studies there to show that the businesses that are doing really well with diversity and inclusivity, they start with their internal processes first and changing that internal corporate culture.
That's such a great point to be making. It's basically like it's everything we have to remember in marketing. And as pointed out to me, you know, in general, too many tourist boards spend time just showing beautiful images of their destinations rather than investing in improving the sustainability or whatever it is of that actual destination product. So busy, you know, promoting the product, they don't actually. Yeah. So I think that's an excellent point. Thank you. So we'll come on to the questions in a moment, but what I really wanted to do, well, actually, I'll look at all these questions that people are observing. There's one for you, Noah, which is, why do you think in this day there's resistance to change by organizations?
That's a really great question. And I think it probably is a little bit of fear of doing something new or doing something different. And I guess because, you know, what they've done in the past has seemed to work. And so there's a little bit more resistance to try and, do something a little bit more creative, a little bit more new, a little bit more undone. But I also think brands are also trying to figure out where they have the right to play and when to use their voice. And I think that's also, it's a longer conversation to be had, right? And so, it could be that some brands are taking that first step to try and understand and to try and not come across as just, essentially diversity washing. But there could be so many reasons for why organizations are resistant or seems to be resistant at this point. As I said before, I think there's a lot of good intention out there. I do think it needs to be harnessed and focused in the right way to kind of get to a point where, again, this is not just something that is a trend, a fad, a fashion, but something that actually lasts longer. So I don't mind them taking their time, but just move a little bit faster.
Yeah, it's a challenging one. So Cecilia, what are your thoughts or comments?
With regards to Noel's point or Jamie Lee's?
Well, more sort of like what's holding organizations back, these big machines and all of this, we need change, but what is it that's making them resistant? Is it practical, is it philosophical? What do we think?
I think it's a combination, but I do really think that organizations need to change structurally first. Because there's a lot of people that are stuck in their ways, that have been in organizations for a long time, that are from certain backgrounds and certain privileges that they can't see beyond what they know and what they've known for so long. So, even these conversations, some still don't want to have because they can't see the need for unconscious bias training, for example, because they're like, well, it's, if you want to visit. In terms of like destination marketing, it's kind of like, well, why wouldn't you want to come? Well, maybe because, like Albert said, your advertising isn't inclusive enough. And that starts from back to Noel's and Jamie Lee made the points of starting from the inside. So I'm really, really happy to hear about Intrepid and Expedia as examples, because the lip service on the outside is one thing, but if you're not doing anything, like to get your house in order, just stop. Like, it's such a waste of money, time, resource, and effort, because really it affects your bottom line. It really does. And I think that we've already seen examples across the board of that across other industries. And not to take the spotlight off the travel industry, because that's the conversation we're having, but if you look at success in kind of the entertainment industry, you're looking at what brands like the Premier League are constantly doing. They're making mistakes, they're making it better, they're trying with No Room to Racism and Rainbow Laces initiatives, for example. Now, I'm not saying that every brand needs to have an initiative, because I mean, in an ideal world, it would just be so normal to just treat everybody the same, because that's exactly what we're asking for in an industry that is so diverse, so multicultural. Why is it difficult?
So thank you, Jamie Lee. What would you obviously work as a consultant as well. What would your advice to someone who's in the audience thinking, wow, we need to start a journey? What's your advice to them to look culturally and internally, how they can improve?
Yeah, that's a big question, and it's a process. It definitely is a process, and I say the first step is to come in and do an audit, some type of audit that kind of looks at your brand, and we need to establish what it is you want to achieve by setting some real key strategic goals of what it is you want to achieve, because diversity and inclusivity is a huge topic, a huge subject with so many different verticals and intersectionalities. So where are you going to start this particular journey? And I think that's the question that comes a lot with organizations. They're like, there's so much, where do I start? How do I get started on this? We have to look at our recruitment and retention policies. We need to look at our marketing and advertising, which is a big element. Where do you really start? So for me, I think it starts with really identifying what it is you want to, where you want to stand in terms of diversity and inclusivity, and then building in different strategies around the individual streams that you're looking to improve in the DEI.
Internally, obviously, I've just seen someone sent a link about a marketing campaign that focuses on the host communities rather than the empty places. So I'll make a little comment here also. So my background is I was founding editor of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is now an OTA, but we started as a guidebook. I'm the first sustainability editor of Condé Nast Traveler. And I will just say about these publications, people often say, you know, why do you have all these images of destinations and places without people in them? Well, the reason we don't have tourists in them generally is because we like the person who's looking at this to imagine themselves, to put themselves there, and we're perhaps setting the scene. That's one explanation why sometimes you have images of empty places. But in terms of showing the actual people in destinations, this is a really good point. And actually, Albert, you made a wonderful sort of point to me about how we need to change the narrative around certain destinations. And, you know, particularly in Africa, apart from anything else, a lot of people don't realize, you know, of the 195 countries in the world, 50 of those are in Africa, and each has its own distinct culture. And as you said, it can be represented as the perfect tropical destination without the nuance or the cutting edge or contemporary aspects of that culture. Would you, I mean, talk more about that? It was a fascinating comment.
Yeah, I mean, just before I delve into that, let me just comment on where to start with. You know, I think which Gemini, Cecilia, and now have spoken quite a lot about. I think the starting point is taking away our fears, that fear of the unknown. Once we take away that fear of trying out something new, that fear of being able to say, okay, I want to, as leaders, I want to initiate change in my organization, then even if it's an uphill task, challenging as it might be, tremendous as it might be, it will be possible to start steps towards initiating steps which will enable you and your team to build in those processes which will initiate that inclusion and diversity. So taking away the fear at senior management level is very, very paramount. So back to the question. How you mentioned about showing destinations in the global south where you have no people, which are more or less empty, lifeless, I would say. Well, there is life there, but it's the nature, wildlife. And it's still that neo-colonial mindset, you know, or post-colonial. I wouldn't call it neo-colonial, post-colonial. It's still that mindset which has been drilled into customers to believe that Africa, Latin America, parts of Southeast Asia are still very virgin, they are still pristine. And it is not the case. The reality is some of these destinations are very well developed. They compete with destinations in the global north. And so it is really, really important for brand managers, for marketers, for advertisers, tourism advertisers to think how they portray these images. They have to reflect the reality. I think it becomes much more interesting, much more enigmatic to have these two different images showing what is good, what is still natural, but the people. I mean, tourism is about the people. It's not only about nature. The people who are responsible for ensuring that that activity takes place, that the whole tourism experience is positive, are often always kept out. And if you see them, they are shown as miserable. They are shown as destitute. Yes, you still have tourism companies which treat their employees in a very, very terrible way, in an abysmal way. But there are positives which need to be reflected. The societies are evolving. And you think about, I'll just give you a simple example with mobile technologies. I mean, Africa has, in terms of using mobile money and mobile financial transactions, it is much more advanced in many African countries than you find here in the UK. When did mobile transfer of mobile financial transactions start in the UK? Probably a few years ago. But you go to Kenya, and M-Pesa had been existing there more than 15, 20 years ago. And it is spread out across many developing countries. So I think we need a shift in how those images are portrayed.
Yeah.
And destinations are advanced. Destinations are inclusive, but we don't focus only on showing the pristine, what it was 100 years ago.
And I think you
just moved on.
Savage with me the other day, which is that's the reality. It's very sophisticated. I mean, there are sophisticated aspects that are not only being misrepresented, but me as a traveler, they make that destination compelling to me. And as you say about people, that is often why we travel. And that is what we need more people to do, because the carbon footprint is not good. But people connecting with other people is going to cultivate more compassion and empathy. And that is what we certainly need to take us forward in all the other ways we're talking. So, thank you. Does anyone else have a comment on that?
I would just love to echo what Albert said and just leave you the one line of reflect the reality. I thought that was so poignant to just recap and just highlight again that we just need to reflect the reality. And when I say that it's simple, it might sound what you're talking about, it's exactly that. It's reflecting the reality. So I thought that was a really, really strong comment. Thank you, Albert.
I completely agree. And also it's more interesting. I mean, I worked on a small project briefly last year, just to mention, in Mozambique. And the person creating it really wanted to represent the sort of architecture, the post-Civil War, which is harsh, but, not playing to these colonial cliches and really sort of telling the story, the history, in a way that actually just differentiates it as a product, which makes commercial sense. And it's just so much more interesting. I don't mean in a fairy tale Disney way at all, but I just exactly that. Just our world is so rich in so many stories, and I think we all need to do a better job. Jamie Lee, or what are your thoughts?
Definitely. I 100% agree with everything that Albert and Cecilia just talked about in terms of reflecting that needs to reflect the society that we live in terms of travel marketing. And I mean, we've seen campaigns time again from destinations which just fall flat. And I often recall going to World Travel Market. And if you go to World Travel Market and you look around at the huge screens in the air, you always only see one homogeneous group being targeted or being showcased all around the conference center, and it's like, so they're missing so many groups of people. And it's for the travel industry and marketeers specifically to remember that we have such a huge responsibility in sharing and shifting the trajectory of diversity and inclusivity when it comes to the marketing element. But once we know, we have to actually be seated at the table first in order to be able to enact that kind of change and be able to speak up. And I feel comfortable enough to speak up in those organizations around what the challenges that we see and that we might face.
I love Natasha's comment, and perhaps ultimately they're also missing out on their ideal traveler, which is great. I'm also thinking, I don't know if you know, but in China, obviously they make hot pots. Well, apparently every village, I've not been to China for many, many years, but every village and possibly every home has their own take on a hot pot. What I feel is we're just not telling that story. We're not evoking the scent, the flavor, the ingredients, that vary all over. And so it's exactly as you say, it's too homogenous. We're just being generic, and it's all of our responsibility to have more details, bring things to life, pull people into our stories, not just push out the generic messaging. So Noah, what would your thought be on this? How do we tell better stories? How do we have more nuance?
No, I love this discussion, and I think I agree with what everybody has said. I think the only thing is that, it does take courage and it does take experimentation to find what works, but there's so much out there to kind of explore and understand and bring forward, that I don't think there's a lack of content that's available for people to try out and to test. And I think, the more people get creative, the more people move away from cookie cutter type of advertising and marketing. I think the more we will start seeing some of these stories being pulled out and being showcased. And hopefully what we'll be able to do is also to get more people come into travel in get more audiences, more diversity in terms of travelers also coming to different parts of the world to explore and to connect.
Natalie has asked the question, and I think a lot of people will want this again. It's what are the tools to ensure that it becomes the norm to see diverse advertising, marketing, representation, whatever you want to call it. What are the tools to help with this, and from now and in the future? Oh, shall I ask one of you? Sorry, who? I want to see a flurry of hands going up. You all want to answer this question, surely.
I think in some ways we kind of, but we pulled up different elements of, you know, those steps. You know, we've got that recruitment and retention element, which is huge, because that's in order, you know, and that doesn't just look at the organization within your organization, but also your supply line. Because one of the questions we hear a lot once we say recruitment and retention is like, oh, no one from those backgrounds ever applied for these roles. So we need to start to look at, okay, look at who are the pipelines, you know, and as, you know, start to expand our black books. Who are the people that we reach out to for information, for quotes, to invite to panels, invite to discussions, you know, we have to broaden all of these things as well when we look at the whole recruitment and retention. And then ensuring that we have people in the C-suite. I think it's really important for leadership, in order for it to be successful, and I think the organizations that are most successful at DEI, it comes from the leadership down. The leaderships are passionate about DEI. They want to see and affect some kind of change. So then their strategy is, DEI is aligned to their overall business strategy. It's not just a tack on or a tag on to, you know, business as usual. They have it aligned to their business strategy in terms of what they want to achieve overall. So I think that would be one of, I mean, outside of, you know, we have to work with diverse content creators and influencers and encouraging these people and really engaging with the communities. I mean, Cecilia talks about this a lot, and she knows she can talk about cultural marketing and all these great things, because we have to engage with these diverse communities if we want to. And when I say engage, it's not just about creating this fancy campaign that touts some images of, you know, a Black woman or an Asian woman in a photo. It's really, how can you develop initiatives to be a part? And this is outside the travel slightly. I think the Jamaica and the Clarks campaign and collaboration is absolutely brilliant. It took a while to get there, but at least they got there, because Clarks has been embedded in Jamaica culture and history for forever, and probably Jamaica was the birthplace of Clarks as the brand externally to the world. So they've now collaborated, and that campaign is so cool. It's showcasing the culture, it's showcasing the artists, it's showcasing the food and the and of course the destination as well. So I think being really authentic, engaging with communities, looking at expanding your Black book, and the recruitment and retention policies are a great place to start.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think also giving opportunity, exactly as you say, to more voices. I mean, I've attended a lot of webinars and talks in the last year, and really, I cannot believe there are still talks about safaris in Africa where it's all just white men talking about it. I just can't believe it. So can I don't want to encourage calling it out, but make it, you know, share observations. Again, lots of all male panels, which really makes me sad. Alessandra, of course, flagged that during this time in the last year, the people who are worst hit by the pandemic in terms of employment are women over the age of 50. So I think, you know, it's just remembering that we just constantly need to be supporting every member of our society all the time, and giving a voice to those who might not have a voice and opportunity. So thank you so much. Obviously, it's an hour-long chat. It's great to have everyone here. We've got 15 minutes. Please bring us some more questions or ask more questions. But what I will say is, you know, what's really key, I think, to move this forward and convert our words into action is, please can I ask each of you, you know, what is your advice for anyone here? Because whether they're an employee or an employer, whether they're a host, whether they're a guest or a traveler, how can we all strive for healthier conversations? You don't have to solve everything right now, but just the conversations around diversity. How can we encourage more? So Albert, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one takeaway for me is going to be encouraging us all to be flexible, to be open, to be honest about our knowledge on issues regarding diversity and inclusion, and to have that desire and willingness to learn and listen about others and from others. And this can only be achieved when we cultivate an environment that value our differences, an environment that is fair, and an environment that is inclusive. That for me is going to be the takeaway. That is it for me.
Yeah. Cecilia, what are your thoughts?
Just say stop hiding. Stop hiding behind your ego, and immerse yourself in communities, in cultures. Learn, as Albert said. Ask the questions to Google, not to your friends from these backgrounds who don't need that additional trauma. Go to find out the information. It's all out there. Use that as a springboard, because it's a lot better to have a conversation with someone from a different community from yourself if you're starting from a place of openness, understanding. You've done some groundwork, so that there's room for change, corrections, learning, and cultivating an environment where you want to know more and you want to do more, not just for an answer to a question, but actually so that you can develop further, whether it's yourself, your business, your brand, other people. I think it really, really does help. So stop hiding behind egos and pay people insights, and they do the work. A lot of people, especially in the last year, have opened themselves to want to support and help develop for the best, develop others and brands for the better. So just put your money where your mouth is and stop expecting people to work in D&I or in spaces where it's educational for free. You're welcome.
Absolutely. I was listening to a chat yesterday on Radio 4 from students, just talking about, I can't do work experience because guess what? I have bills to pay. And I do think this is something we really need to think about, is giving opportunity to those who don't have opportunities. And I know as a journalist, I did do work experience. I was unpaid, but I worked in an off license in the evening. I handed out flyers outside nightclubs all weekend. But you shouldn't have to do that. There should be lots of people investing and giving opportunities. So I'd say anyone here who can give opportunities to those who perhaps haven't had a head start or don't have the right network, because there's lots of, nepotism, and that's a wonderful tip. Oh, it's a great echo. It's gone all sci-fi. Noah, what would you think?
I think my advice would be, expect mistakes to be made by yourself and by others as well. And it's really important to have compassion for yourself and for others in this area, because I think Albert, you mentioned that we're all on this learning curve, and we are all going to be learning together, and it's so important for us to figure out, how do we keep the conversation going, how do we keep on moving forward, and learning from the mistakes quickly, but also ensuring that we are progressing as a group together. I think it's important not to kind of leave people out, because I think that creates an even more exclusive kind of environment, and that's what you don't want. You don't want this to be an echo chamber. You want this to be something that is going to change society, transform society, and move away from kind of the systemic issues that we've been facing.
Completely, I so agree with you. Jamie Lee, what are your thoughts? Albert? Oh, actually, I think it's fine. I was going to say, can you put your mute thing on in case we get feedback? But hey, we love a bit of feedback. We got the heavy metal. We're in the mood for heavy metal. Jamie Lee, what are your thoughts? Obligatory, you're on mute comment. Sorry. We got to have one. It's like if anyone's playing webinar bingo, we've had paradigm shift. So Jamie Lee, you're on mute.
Okay, I don't know how that happened, but it happened. I would say that it is a mixed bag of everything that everyone said. Definitely listen. I love this quote where it says conversation equals transformation. So talk to your colleagues, find out what some of the things that they might face and how can you really support them. Learn is a really big key there, so things like, I know Cecilia mentioned, go and do the research on your own and learn, but also be open to things like reverse mentoring with a colleague from a different background. You learn a lot about them, yourself, and you also have those uncomfortable conversations to pick up some critical do's and don'ts. And then I think support is really important. How can you champion someone from an underrepresented community to support their career growth or increase their company retention or give them an opportunity within your organization. And then I think really important is to make everybody accountable within the organization, because fostering an environment of inclusion, I think, is good for business. So everyone should be involved in, not just the individuals who might be underrepresented.
Thank you. I've actually seen a comment in the chat from Pooja, and I really feel I want to comment myself on this because I really relate to it. So she said, as a content creator, I struggle with approvals of unique experiential pitch ideas. Companies want generic topics. They do. I'm sorry about that. Honestly, this is a safe space. I can be honest, right? So sometimes I see the headlines on my articles for Condé Nast Traveler go up, and I'm like, oh my goodness. It's a digital world. We have to see how the articles are going to traffic, to use a noun as a verb. And so they aren't the most imaginative. They're a bit risk averse with content, but please, Pooja, decide what you care about most and know that, zoom in on that topic and understand it better than anyone else. So sustainable luxury travel is actually my niche, and specifically hotels. And really there's, 2 years ago, again, safe space, I'll be honest with you, 3 years ago, travel editor of one of the major newspapers said, Juliet, stop sending these ideas about sustainable travel. I don't care. Readers don't care. Seriously. So as we've all woken up to this, people do care about sustainability. I kept persevering. And in that time was really, really, by the time everyone lent into the conversation, I really do know it very, very well. So please keep at it. Don't be dispirited. Just zoom in on details and have your point of view, and just keep at it. People will eventually, I hope, they will listen to you. And perhaps, who you're going to in terms of wanting generic content might not be right. There's lots of, if you know something, if it's really interesting and specific, and you can demonstrate perhaps that how it might convert to an audience, that might be helpful. Any more questions or for the panel? Lots of thoughts have been coming in. It's really, really grateful. It makes it really great for us. Thank you for your feedback. It is a great panel. I have one other question from Rhiannon. This is for Cecilia. Thank you so much. It's okay. This is the thing. It's the longevity question. Any thoughts on how talking about EDI as an initiative rather than long-term, how can lasting change, rather than long-term, lasting change can impede progress? Does that make sense? Did I read that?
Sorry.
In the Q&A, if you have a peek. So in terms of how do we, talking about EDI as an initiative rather than long-term, I'm reading the question, but in terms of thinking about things, not just thinking of it as a sort of short-term initiative, and how can lasting change be manifested, let's say?
For organizations such as, destination marketing organizations, hotels, service providers as well, I'd say start with a strategy. Rip up what you've done before because it's not working. Start from there. Start with the plan. Get the blueprint down that speaks to all of these areas that you want to contribute to. So that, to Juliet's point, everything becomes, part of a sustainable process, part of a long. It's a long burner because, as we've all said or alluded to here, it's not going to happen overnight. So you need to make sure that it is positioned within organizations, whatever part of the industry that you're in, as something that needs to be, accounted for, and make sure that there are goals and targets and things that are set so that it's part of the lasting change and not just okay, let's do this now because it's trending, and get that tick box in it as well. But it actually becomes part of the culture of the organization. And once you can shift to become part of the culture of the organization, you're in the right place. To the examples that were, flagged earlier with the likes of Expedia and Intrepid Travel, moving in the right direction for it to become normal and natural. And I'm sure that in a few years' time, Expedia won't be, celebrating having diverse women in a certain area of their business. They will just be talking about the women that they've got in their business doing their thing, I hope. So I think let's go with that. And I've said it to a few people in this panel, like I really don't want to be doing cultural sustainability, and strategy soon. And also probably Juliet in sustainability, because it should be the norm.
Doing sustainability.
We should be doing it. That's normal. You know, and these topics and these conversations and these initiatives should really, and I know I sound probably very wishful, but I'm really very hopeful that this has to be a turning point that actually instills change across the board.
This has been such a great conversation. We're coming towards the end of it. I just wondered if any of the group has something else they'd like to add. Noah, I know you will have another thought. What would you leave everyone with, a parting thought, inspiration? I'm going to attribute this to you and not Google, by the way. We don't need Google to lead us.
No, I think it's really good to kind of keep this conversation going, and it's important to have this conversation at every level of the company. I think it's so important, you know, at the leadership level, at the guest level, at the marketer level, to continuously talk about it, to question, to make mistakes, to learn from it. Like this continuous cycle, I guess, of learning needs to be in place. And of course, like, you know, one thing we didn't touch very much is like the measurement part of all this. You know, how do we know that we're making an impact? And I hope that, you know, in future conversations we can start having those conversations too, because it's so important, to Jamie Lee's point, to have accountability on the work that we do.
Measure it, because I'm not getting any alerts telling me to be quiet just yet. So we're all chatting, we're all here. How do you give us a little bit of wisdom on that?
Yeah, I think at Google we've you know, really put a lot of effort into firstly understanding our workforce. It's not easy because, you know, there's different laws, different rules in different countries around how to what we're allowed to kind of measure. So a lot of it is self-identified by employees themselves. We've tried to collect this data over time to kind of see, you know, what the trends are. So to understand, like, where's our gap when it comes to hiring and retention. We've made these, you know, these documents public, so we have accountability. That's a big part of like how we're trying to push ourselves, and really there's like work that needs to happen at every level. Again, you know, there's the from the hiring perspective, you know, I think Jamie Lee mentioned there's a you know, it's you always come to the excuse that, you know, there's not enough people of X background to kind of hire from, and so there is a lot of work to be done at the grassroots level on that, to kind of build that up. But it's so important also to just be honest. Like sometimes, you know, you're not doing a good enough job and you have to do more.
So I'm sorry, only because we are running out of time now. I lured you in and then I totally threw you under a bus there. But if people can get more info, where can they find out? Thank you everyone for being here today and thinking more deeply about these things. Where can they find out more about, I mean, it's science, it's storytelling, it's systemic change. But Noah, where can they follow up on what you were talking about?
So if you could Google diversity report, I think that's one place that you can find it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I love this. You know, we can't travel right now, but we can be connected by these platforms. She says buying time because she's not quite sure what to do yet on this. So it's that sort of small talk part of the end of the evening. Albert, give us your favorite final thought, like Jerry Springer.
Well, I think one of my final thought would be for us as potential customers, you know, for us as future leaders or leaders within the industry, to think about embedding diversity and inclusion in all our actions. Taking a very good look at ourselves, our organizations, and our actions, our policies, and the frameworks which currently guide our operations, and determining whether they are fit for purpose or they are fit for the 20th century. We're now in the 21st century. And if we can understand what we are doing, where we've come from, where we are now, then it provides a good framework for us as employees, for us as managers and leaders, and for us as organizations to build those processes in place, to incorporate, to embed diversity and inclusion in all aspects, and laterally and vertically in our operations.
Thank you. I think that's wiser than anything Jerry Springer has ever said. So we can be proud of that final. Take care of yourselves and each other. We're going to a break. Thank you.